In this drawing, we're going to learn where the major deserts of the world are located. Now, this isn't going to be all the deserts of the world. There's some smaller deserts we're not going to label, but these are the largest and most well-known deserts. I'm going to use a black marker. I'll probably use this one, but if you have one of these or even a black ballpoint, this will make our lines show up better. We're going to draw lines from the words to the location of the desert, and I found that they show up better using one of these than a regular pencil. You'll also need some colored pencils, but you don't have to use the same colors that I'm going to use on my map. The color doesn't have any significance in this drawing. I know oftentimes in my instructional drawings I say to use a certain color for a particular thing, like I want to color the digestive system parts all orange or something like that. But on this one, there's no significance to the color. You can use any color you want. You can use the ones I use or a different one. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to start over here and kind of work my way over. So let's start in North America. This is about as zoomed in as I can get on the map. I think it'll be okay. We're just going to draw right in this area. I think it'll be large enough you can see them. Alright, so let's start at the bottom and go up. Let's start with the Chihuahuan. It looks like Chihuahua. The Chihuahua is an area in Mexico. So this is mainly in Mexico. I'm going to use orange. You can use a different color. And I'm going to color in section of Mexico like this. Now our areas are going to be pretty approximate. If you got a map of the Chihuahuan Desert, you'd see that the edges are kind of probably more wiggly and complicated than this, but for our purposes this is okay. We need to know it's in Mexico. It goes up into New Mexico a bit, and then maybe catches a little bit of Texas there. It's mainly Mexico, and that is the Chihuahuan. Let's draw a line like that. And then the Sonoran is right here next to the Chihuahuan. It's a lot of this peninsula here, Baja California it's called, like that. Goes up into California. Now I know the states aren't all labeled here, but this is where California would be. Over into Arizona, down to Mexico a little bit, kind of like that. And then the Mojave, so the J says Mojave, is right above the Sonoran, and it's actually kind of all one desert area. It's like this. It's basically all one desert. So you wonder, well, why do they call it something different? Well, it's mainly because there's some things that you find in this area, in the Sonoran, that you don't find in Mojave, and vice versa. And I'll just show you a picture, show you what I mean. This is a typical landscape in the Sonoran Desert, and this is the one that's famous for these saguaro cactuses. This is your classic cactus with the arms and everything, prickly pears. But the Sonoran Desert is the only place in the world where these saguaros grow. Now the Mojave looks more like this. So that's quite a bit different, isn't it? That versus that. And the Mojave is where you find a lot of these Joshua trees. It's actually a cactus, not a tree. But this Joshua tree is characteristic of the Mojave. And it has a lot of these yuccas and agaves and stuff. So the landscape looks a bit different. So they decided to label them as different deserts, although the whole region is pretty much the same. There's a big desert here. So that's the Mojave. And then the Great Basin is kind of the area in here. It continues to be desert, but the Great Basin is between two mountain ranges that we'll draw in a minute here. Kind of go like this. It's actually a very large area. like that. And it's between some mountains here. Let's take a regular pencil and we'll make some little upside down V's. There's mountains here and there's mountains here. This is the Rocky Mountains I'm drawing now. Rockies, and actually they go all the way up into Canada, even up into Alaska, like that. And they go down, there's some mountains here, and they actually continue kind of, there's some mountains a little bit down through here, off the map, and into South America. But up here we call them the Rockies. These are the Sierra Nevadas. So the Great Basin sits between these two mountain ranges. And a typical landscape in the Great Basin looks something like this. So that's very different from this or this. So you can see why it needs its own name. There's actually a lot of variety in the Great Basin. Some places in the Great Basin don't look anything like this either. And there's actually some trees there. It's not really a cactus desert. It has different plants and animals from these other southern deserts. So again, the Colorado Plateau over here sometimes gets called a desert, but we're not going to do that on this map. So now let's go down to South America. And a lot of South America, like all through here, this is rainforest. This is the area of the Amazon. It's very wet. But along the coast here, along this coast, you get a very dry area. Now this is the country of Peru. And then now I'm coloring into Chile. This long, skinny country is Chile. It goes a little bit over into here. I think this laps over into, I believe, Bolivia. A little bit there. And of course, this is the Atacama. It's labeled right there. And we have these mountains, kind of the same range as the Rockies, sort of along here. And this is one reason why this desert is here. Because the wet, moist air over the rainforests is moving this way. The prevailing winds, that means most of the time the wind is blowing this way, and it takes this moist air over to the mountains, and then it has to rise, it has to go up over the mountains and then down. And on its way up, the air loses its moisture, gets cool, the moisture drops as rain, so it rains over here. By the time the air gets to the other side, over here it's completely dry, and so you get this long dry desert. And then the other area of desert is what they call Patagonia, down here. I'm going to use blue because it's a cold desert. Not all deserts are hot. Some are very cold. In fact, Antarctica is actually a desert. Technically, it gets less than 10 inches, or 25 centimeters of rain per year, so it's actually technically a desert. Plus areas at the North Pole, probably the same thing. But they're not called deserts. We don't call it the Antarctic desert, or, you know, there's no places that have desert in their name, so we're not going to label them in this drawing. But the Arctic and Antarctic areas are technically desert. Okay, so this is the Patagonian desert, or you can just call it Patagonia. Now let's move over to Africa. And it's in Africa we find the world's largest desert. Certainly you know this one, the Sahara. And we'll start over here. This little country is called Western Sahara. It looks like a stair step, kind of going like that. This is very deserty. Not very many people live here. It's pretty dry. Very, very dry. And then up into a little bit of Morocco here, going over into Algeria. Now, don't go all the way to the northern coast. Northern coast is more of a Mediterranean. We could take a little bit, I think a tiny bit of Tunisia there in the bottom. Sahara hits across here. like this down through here. Across of Sudan right there. Sudan's a good section. And all the way to the Red Sea over here. It goes from coast to coast. Now up here through Egypt, this is also desert, but I'm going to color this differently. So it's called the Sinai Desert, so we'll label that differently. This is the Sahara. And then down here in the south we have the Namib. The Namib Desert is Namibia. Right along the coast. Kind of reminds us of the Atacama Desert. Along there. It's a skinny, long skinny desert. And then we have the Kalahari, which is right in here. It's part of Namibia, goes down to South Africa, kind of something like this, approximately. Of course, again, this is a pretty rough approximation. It's not really an exact circle, but it's good enough. Kalahari. And then if we go up to Europe, we don't really have to do much up here. Europe is the one continent that doesn't really have deserts. I don't really like to call this a continent because a continent's a major landmass, and Europe's actually part of Asia. The reason I call it a continent, there's some mountains that go down here, but I like to call it Eurasia. It's a whole continent, really. But at any rate, this section that we call Europe really doesn't have much in the way of deserts. There's a few dry spots in Spain that we can add right down here. This actually qualifies as a desert right here. There's a tiny one right here that might actually technically have that little amount of rainfall. But mostly we don't find deserts in Europe. I think Wikipedia's official list of deserts lists a couple other tiny ones over here, but we're not going to bother with them. We're going to go straight over to the Middle East. And let's put in the Arabian Desert. Pretty much the entire Arabian Peninsula is a giant desert. Pretty much. Maybe not quite to the coast, but this whole area is extreme desert here. The middle section here is called the empty quarter. It's pretty empty. Like the Sahara has a big section where nobody lives, and then here too, the center of Arabia is not very habitable at all. Mainly people live around the edge of the peninsula. And then there's some smaller deserts that I decided to label because I thought you might have heard of them, like Sinai, the Negev, the Syrian, and the Judean. Might be ones that you're familiar with. So the Sinai, let's see, I'm going to maybe choose maybe purple. I'm going to put a dot of color like this next to it. And I'll go over here. The Sinai Desert is the Sinai Peninsula, which is this little triangle between Africa and Arabia. Like that. And then Negev, this is going to be really tiny, really isn't going to be possible to color it actually, but it's a little dot right here, right next to the Sinai, kind of right there. Pretty small on this map. And then the Syrian Desert, let's see, we'll get over to Syrian Desert is, maybe I'll pick green, even though deserts aren't really green, that'll show up. Over here, it's kind of like parts of Syria into Iraq, kind of like that. And then the Judean, I'm not sure what's going to show up, maybe bright blue, I don't know. It's just going to be a little tiny dot right here. The land of Israel right there. So Israel has some of the Negev and Judean desert right there. And then let's go up to Asia, which has some large deserts. Probably the most well-known large desert is the Gobi. And I'm going to use blue. It's a cold desert, so I'm going to use blue, or at least a lot of it's cold. Of course, deserts, they all get really cold at night. A lot of people don't realize that deserts are very hot in the daytime. I mean, even these cactus deserts, yeah, they're over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the daytime, but at night they get cold, 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 and you need a winter jacket. Parts of the Gobi are kind of chilly even in the summer. Alright, so it's like this. This is Mongolia, right here. So a lot of it's in Mongolia, and then down into China. Below here is China. So this is kind of the approximate area of the Gobi. There's a lot of variety within the Gobi. It doesn't all look the same. I couldn't just show you a landscape and say this is a Gobi desert, because I'd have to show you about 6 different landscapes. And then the Taklamakan is in this area. This is all the countries that end in stan, like Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan and Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. So it's right about the 2 smaller ones right in here, right about there. So Taklamakan. And then the Karakum, which actually means black sand. I think Kara is black and Kum must mean sand, because there's another one called the Kizilkum. So I'm guessing that's some other kind of something to do with sand. So the Karakum is mostly in the country of Turkmenistan, which is right here. In fact, first you want to take a color, maybe a blue, and find this shape right here. It looks maybe kind of like the letter F or an upside down L or something. This is actually a sea. This is the Caspian Sea. And it might help to just color that in. In fact, here's the Black Sea over here. That helps you to determine what's land and what's water. So now you know where the Caspian Sea is, right here. But Turkmenistan is right here. And this desert is kind of like this. Right in there. Karakum's claim to fame is they have a giant crater that's on fire. The local people call it the Gates of Hell, because this thing is just a big giant circle, and you can just stand there and look, and it's actually got natural gas coming from below that's caught fire, and it's this big fiery hole. Anyways, tourists come to see that. Okay, and then let's just finish up down here with Australia. And I'll show you a map first. I just got this off of Wikipedia to show you the exact outlines of these deserts. These are pretty wiggly, like this one. Look, here we go. This big. This is a really complicated shape. And then this one, like this, comes down here. And again, the reason why they define these as different deserts is probably because there are plant or animal or geological features that are unique to these areas. So this is one kind of complicated. It goes down here and it wiggles around like this. It has a little piece out of it in the middle. So we're going to be a lot simpler than this, where our shapes are going to be pretty basic, but at least you'll know basically where the desert is located. Okay, so let's start with the Great Sandy Desert. And that would be this one right here. Okay, so we're just going to kind of draw like a big oval coming in like that. Starts about here. It goes in like this. It actually looks sort of like a fish a little bit. It looks like it actually has like a fin on top. Oh, I'll show you again. Just remind you of a dolphin or something. There's a fin. There's the tail. There's a bottom fin. Looks a lot like a dolphin, doesn't it? Okay, so just draw yourself a little dolphin here. The Great Sandy Desert. The fish in the desert. And then next, let's draw the Gibson Desert. And there's a little piece of it down here, like right here. If you want to add an extra one, you want to be really exact. There's a little bit down here called the, just a little bit like that, called the Little Sandy Desert. If you want to add that, but this is the important one. And then next we're going to put in this one right here. There's a piece like this, kind of goes right here. It's a smaller one, like this. I don't know what it looks like. I'll show you what we're drawing. We're drawing this one right here. Right like this. So I don't know what it looks like. Kind of tucks in under the fin there like that. This is the Gibson Desert. And then under that we have the Great Victoria. I'm just going to go back to using orange again. And it kind of goes down like this and follows the coast like that down. It goes down into this peninsula down there. Like that. Great Victoria. I assume it's named after Queen Victoria. A lot of things are named after Queen Victoria. And then over on the other side we have the Tanami Desert, which is actually right above the Great Sandy. I use a different color for this. Kind of goes up like this. This is the one that looks like has a bird's neck on this one side. Here, and then it has this little squiggle thing like this. And then we're going to do the Simpson Desert. So I'll go back to using red maybe. And that is right in here. It has a very wiggly outline. Up and down. And something like this. Right about here. Now, even though there's some white space there, you're thinking, oh, well, that's, this here, this isn't a desert. It's still really dry. There's nothing in the interior of Australia that's like a rainforest or anything. Definitely, it's all a bit dry. Now, there is like another tiny desert area sticking off of here. If you want to label that, you can go get a map and do that. But I think for our purposes, that's enough. And there's the final map again. Again, you're welcome to add to it if you'd like to, but this gives you the biggest and most well-known deserts of the world.